K-9 German Shepherd found covered in ash after wildfire. What he did next shocked the firefighters. He was barely recognizable when they found him. His one-star coat coated in soot, paws burned from smoldering ground, and eyes filled with a determination no one could explain. The wildfire had consumed everything around him. The forest was gone. The cabins had turned to rubble. But this German shepherd refused to move. He stood alone, covered in ash, guarding something the firefighters couldn't see at first. And when they followed his gaze, what they discovered left every man on the team speechless. This wasn't just another rescue. This was the beginning of a story about courage, instinct, and a bond stronger than fire itself. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a powerful and emotional story like this one. What this K-9 did will stay with you long after the video ends. Per Gunter AO ChatGPT. The forest fire in Northern California had been burning for 3 days straight. From the first blaze sparked by a downed power line to the walls of flame that devoured acres of pine, the inferno had moved like a monster, fast, loud, and merciless. Evacuation orders had gone out within hours, and whole communities were pulled out of their homes with barely enough time to grab a photo album or a family dog. Roads had melted. Trees exploded. The air was thick with smoke and grief. By the fourth morning, as the fire crews swept through the burn zone for survivors or signs of life, the world had turned into gray silence. Charred earth, collapsed structures, ash falling like snow. Captain Will Hayes, a seasoned firefighter with 20 years under his belt, led his exhausted crew down what used to be a residential lane. Check every foundation. He barked through his soot-stained mask. Animals, people, anything. They didn't expect to find anyone alive. They never did on mornings like this. But then they heard the growl. At first, Will thought it was a hallucination. The sound was low, steady, not aggressive, not warning, but something else entirely. Something protective. He stepped closer to the ruins of what had once been a small log cabin and raised his hand. Hold up. Smoke curled upward in soft tendrils. Ash coated everything like powdered sugar, except one spot. In the middle of the wreckage stood a dog, large, muscular, coated in gray and black soot. His fur was matted, his body clearly wounded. The pads of his feet were red and raw, and there were patches where the fire had singed the fur clean off. But the dog stood tall, silent now, his chest rising and falling like he'd run for miles and then stopped on command. And he didn't move, not when Will took a step forward, not when the other firefighters whispered. He was guarding something. Will crouched down slowly. "Hey, buddy," he said, voice soft and steady. "It's okay. We're here to help." The dog didn't blink. He didn't growl. He simply stared. And then, slowly, he looked down, directing their eyes to the pile of rubble he stood over. It wasn't rubble. It was a hatch. Will's heart jumped. "Over here!" he shouted, waving his team forward. "I think there's something underneath." 2 men rushed over with tools. One pried at the metal ring half buried in ash. The other cleared debris. Will kept glancing at the dog, whose body didn't shift an inch. It was like he was carved from the stone beneath him. Then, with a sharp crack, the hatch gave way. The cover flew open, and from the hollow beneath, a cough. "Human voice," someone yelled. "There's someone down there." Adrenaline surged. A ladder was dropped into the hidden storm shelter. Will descended first. Inside, curled up and clinging to life, was a boy, maybe 10 years old, pale, coughing violently from the lingering smoke, but conscious. His hands were clutching a blanket, and his lips were cracked from dehydration. But he was alive. "We got you," Will said, wrapping an arm around the child. "You're safe." Minutes later, the boy was lifted out of the shelter into sunlight and oxygen. The dog didn't move. He simply watched. Only when the boy opened his eyes, looked up, and whispered, "Blitz," did the animal collapse to the ground. His job was done. Later that afternoon, in an emergency veterinary tent near the fire zone, Blitz was laid out on a thick foam mat, hooked up to fluids and covered in soft, sterile blankets. His breathing was shallow but stable. The vet, a volunteer named Dr. Aria Monroe, shook her head as she cleaned the wounds. "This dog should be dead," she muttered. "He walked through fire to guard that boy." Will stood nearby, arms crossed, watching with quiet awe. He didn't run, he said. That fire was hell. But he stayed. He stayed until we saw him. Dr. Monroe glanced up. Do we know who he belongs to? Will shook his head. No microchip. But the boy, he called him Blitz. Said he was a police dog. Retired? Maybe, Will said. Or abandoned. I don't know. But that kid survived because of him. He stepped closer to the table and looked down at Blitz. His fur was still ashen, his eyes barely open. Will reached out and gently placed his hand on the shepherd's head. Thank you, he whispered, and in that moment, barely a breath, Blitz's tail moved. Just once, a slow, tired wag. Back at the hospital, the boy, Lucas Daniels, was recovering in the pediatric wing. His parents had been found hours later at a local shelter, having assumed their son had escaped the fire with neighbors. When they arrived, tears streaming, Lucas only had one question. Where's Blitz? When they told him the dog had saved him, stayed with him, never left his side even as fire raged around them, Lucas nodded like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That's what he does, he said softly. He's a hero. The parents exchanged glances. The father cleared his throat. Lucas, where did Blitz come from? We've never had a dog. Lucas looked away. He found me. The mother stepped closer. Honey, what do you mean? Lucas's voice cracked. I found him last summer in the woods. He had a cut on his leg. I brought him food. I talked to him every day. He never left. Will, who had entered quietly at the back of the room, now stepped forward. So he was watching over you? Lucas nodded. He was waiting. The boy whispered. He knew. Will felt a chill run up his spine. This wasn't just instinct. This was loyalty. This was purpose. That night, under the tent, Blitz stirred for the first time on his own. Dr. Monroe leaned in, surprised. He's waking. Will knelt beside the dog, heart pounding. Blitz's eyes opened, slow and glassy. He looked around. Then, painfully, he tried to rise. No, easy, Will said, pressing a calming hand to his shoulder. But Blitz didn't want to lie down. He sat up, wobbly, and looked toward the open flap of the tent, toward the hospital lights in the distance, toward Lucas. He let out one low, soft bark. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a cry. It was a call. He wanted to go. To the boy. Will looked at the vet. Dr. Monroe sighed. Give me an hour to stabilize him. Then I'll say yes. Blitz, exhausted, laid his head back down, but not in defeat. He would go. He would finish what he started. The next morning brought a sharp change in the air. The smoke that had choked the skies for days began to clear. Helicopters still buzzed overhead, and small flare-ups were being extinguished across the hillsides. But for the first time in nearly a week, sunlight poured through the trees, casting long beams of gold across the wreckage. Blitz had made it through the night. Not just made it. He had surprised everyone. Dr. Arya Monroe, who'd monitored him hourly, was stunned by how the German shepherd's vitals stabilized faster than expected. His body was battered, his paws raw, and there were signs of smoke inhalation, but somehow he refused to break. You'd think he knew the kid was still waiting for him. She said aloud to Will Hayes as she checked the floor. Will gave a half smile. He does. In the pediatric recovery room at North Valley Hospital, Lucas sat upright in his bed, blanket tucked to his chest. His parents, tired but relieved, sat nearby. But Lucas wasn't paying attention to the cartoons playing softly on the TV. He kept glancing at the door. Every few minutes, he'd ask the same question. Did they bring Blitz yet? Every few minutes, the answer was the same. Not yet, buddy. Soon. Will arrive mid-morning with coffee in one hand and a folded photo in the other. I thought you want to see this, he said, handing the picture to Lucas. It was a snapshot taken by one of the crew. Blitz standing on the ash-covered shelter, staring straight into the camera, a sentinel of smoke and steel. Lucas stared at it. His fingers trembled as he held the photo. That's him. That's my Blitz. Will sat on the edge of the bed. You know, I've seen a lot of dogs, but I've never seen one do what he did. Lucas looked down. He wasn't always like that, the boy whispered. When I first found him, he didn't even let me touch him. He had a scar on his leg. I think he was hurt before. Well, lean forward. Do you know where he came from? Lucas hesitated, then shook his head. No, but he's smart. Like, he understands everything. Will nodded. We think he used to be a working dog. Maybe military. Maybe police. Lucas's eyes widened. That makes sense. He always stayed alert, like he was guarding something. Will smiled. Yeah, he was guarding you. At noon, an official report came in from a nearby K-9 training center. One of the junior staff had seen Blitz's photo and recognized him. His real name was Axel. He had served 5 years in urban search and rescue out of Sacramento. After his last deployment, a multi-building collapse during an earthquake. Axel was retired due to PTSD. His handler had died on site. Axel had escaped during transport to a new home and was presumed lost. That was 3 years ago. When we'll read the report, he didn't speak for nearly a minute. He handed the paper to Dr. Monroe. So he's not just a hero now. He always was. She nodded, blinking back tears. He never stopped being one. Lucas was asleep when Will returned that afternoon. His mother met Will in the hallway. He's exhausted, she whispered. He's had nightmares every night since the fire. But he only rests when you talk about the dog. Will smiled gently. He doesn't know yet. Know what? That Blitz's real name is Axel. That he was a rescue dog. That he was trained to find and protect people buried under debris. The mother covered her mouth, eyes welling. Oh my God. He lost his handler years ago. Will continued. And he's been alone ever since until your son. She shook her head slowly. He found a purpose again. Or maybe he never lost it. Dr. Monroe wheeled Blitz, Axel, into the hospital's side corridor later that day. The dog still looked rough. He had bandages on both front legs, and one ear was singed and half-folded, but his eyes were sharp, alert, focused. When they entered Lucas's room, the boy gasped so loud the heart monitor jumped. Blitz! The dog perked up immediately at the sound. His body tensed, not in fear, but in attention, and as soon as Dr. Monroe released the brake, he stepped off the cart and limped straight to Lucas's bedside. Lucas threw his arms around the dog's neck. Everyone in the room cried, quietly, respectfully, but no one stopped the reunion. It was a kind of moment that rewired the air, made it heavy with meaning. You came, Lucas whispered into Blitz's fur. I knew you would. Blitz closed his eyes and leaned into the hug. It wasn't just relief. It was peace. Will stepped out of the room and called a K-9 unit in Sacramento. I have your dog, he said. The woman on the other end hesitated. We thought he was dead. There was even a plaque. Well, he's not. He's here. And he just saved a kid's life by guarding him through a wildfire. Silence. Then, what do you want to do? We'll look back through the glass. Lucas and Blitz were curled up together, asleep as if they'd never known fear or fire. I want to give him the choice, Will said. I think he's already made it. The media caught wind of the story the next day. Photos of the dog standing in the ash, protecting the shelter, went viral. Headlines read, Retired K-9 German Shepherd guards boy through wildfire. Dog found in ashes after blaze revealed to be hero from the past. He saved me. 10-year-old boy reunites with mysterious German Shepherd. Will receive dozens of calls. Animal rescue centers, veterans organizations, local and national news outlets. But he kept it quiet for Lucas, for Blitz, for the piece they'd finally found. When a news crew asked to film their story, Will agreed on one condition. No exploitation. You tell the truth. You tell people what this dog did, and who he is. The reporter nodded. We will. The segment aired 2 days later, and millions of people watched. Donations poured into the hospital. Axel, once lost, was now honored. He was a hero all over again. But despite the praise, something deeper remained. Lucas was healing. Slowly. He still woke up some nights crying. Still asked questions no 10-year-old should ever have to ask. But every time, Blitz was there, lying by the bed, watching, breathing, reassuring. One night, as Will tucked Lucas in, the boy asked, Do you think he'll ever leave me? Will sat on the edge of the bed, placing a hand on Blitz's back. No, he said. I don't think he knows how. Lucas smiled, and Blitz rested his head on the boy's chest, listening to the heartbeat he had saved with fire in his lungs and ashes on his coat. The hospital released Lucas 3 days later. He walked out with a small backpack, his mother on one side and Blitz, or rather Axel, on the other. Though the dog still limped slightly, his presence was strong, noble. He wore a makeshift service vest that Dr. Monroe had stitched from donated gear, its bright orange color clashing against the soot stain still faintly visible on his fur. News cameras lined the sidewalk. Lucas flinched when he saw them. Axel noticed first. The second the boy slowed down, Axel stepped in front of him, blocking the lenses with his broad body, head low and steady. Protective, calm. The photographers froze. Will, walking just behind them, raised a hand. Back off. Let them have this moment. To everyone's surprise, the reporters respected it. They lowered their cameras. One even clapped. Lucas reached for Axel's neck and whispered, "Thank you." Back home, the family's temporary rental smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. Their old house had been reduced to ashes. Nothing could be recovered. No photos, no furniture, no walls to return to. But this new house had light, warmth, and space. And now it had Blitz. Lucas refused to call him Axel. "Blitz is who he became when he found me." The boy explained to Will, "I think that name's a second chance." Will didn't argue. He understood. In fact, part of him had already begun referring to the dog that way too. Blitz, the dog who had stood in fire. The name felt earned. The nights were the hardest. Lucas often jolted awake from nightmares, screaming, gasping, drenched in sweat. His parents would rush in, but nothing calmed him like Blitz. The moment the dog pressed his weight against the bed, the trembling stopped. If Blitz licked his face, the tears dried. If he barked once, soft and low, Lucas would nod off again, fingers curled around the dog's fur. Will stayed close in those first days, checking in often, sometimes sleeping on the couch. He knew trauma didn't fade just because the danger had passed. But something about watching Blitz work, not as a soldier, not as a trained tool, but as a living protector, changed something in him. It reminded Will why he became a firefighter in the first place. It wasn't just about saving lives. It was about staying when everyone else left. Like Blitz. One afternoon, a black SUV pulled up in front of the rental. A tall woman in military fatigues stepped out. She had sharp green eyes, a clipped walk, and a folder tucked beneath her arm. Will met her on the porch. Lieutenant Major Julia Cormack. She introduced herself. K-9 Recovery Unit, Sacramento. Will stiffened. "You're here for Blitz?" "I'm here for Axel," she corrected. "But not the way you think." Lucas peeked through the window, his eyes wide. Will stepped out onto the driveway. "You should know, that dog isn't going anywhere he doesn't want to go." Cormack opened the folder. Inside were photos. Blitz during training, Blitz beside his former handler. Blitz in full uniform beside rubble and broken cities. "He was the best we had," she said quietly. But when his partner died, he shut down. He escaped his kennel the day we tried to relocate him. We searched for weeks, but he vanished. Will folded his arms. "Until now." Cormack nodded. "I saw the footage," she said. "The wildfire, the hatch, the boy. That wasn't just instinct. That was training. Still alive under trauma. Most dogs forget their duty after that kind of loss. Axel didn't." Will glanced back toward the house. Cormack continued. "He should have died, but he didn't. He held on. For a reason." Will's voice dropped. "So what do you want?" She looked him in the eyes. To give him the honor he never got. That weekend, Blitz was honored in a private ceremony held at the North Valley Fire Station. The mood was solemn but warm. Members of the fire crew who had first discovered him were in attendance. Dr. Monroe gave a short speech. Even Lucas was invited to speak, and though his voice trembled at first, he stood tall. Blitz didn't run from the fire, he said. Gripping the mic, he waited. "For me, and I think maybe for all of you, too." Everyone stood when Blitz limped the stage, vest freshly washed, a small silver badge clipped to the side that read, "In service." Always. Cormack knelt down in front of him and pinned a small ribbon to his harness. For bravery beyond the line of duty, she said, and for loyalty that outlived command. Blitz didn't bark, didn't flinch. He simply sat, proud and still, like he understood. And maybe he did. But just as peace began to settle, the past returned. We received a call from a woman in rural Auburn, 200 miles from the fire zone. "I think I know Blitz," she said. "I think I was supposed to adopt him before he disappeared." Her name was Valerie. She ran a rescue ranch for a retired K-9S. 3 years ago, she had been selected to take Axel after his final deployment. The paperwork had been filed. She even had the food bowls set out. Then he vanished. "I never stopped hoping he was alive," she said, her voice breaking. "But now that I know where he is..." Will tensed. "You want him back?" There was a pause. "No," she whispered. "I want to meet the boy he chose." They arranged a meeting the following week. Valerie arrived with a bag of old training gear and treats she swore Blitz used to love. Lucas was nervous, but curious. Blitz, however, ran to her the second she stepped through the door. He sniffed her hands, nuzzled her leg, sat at her feet. She knelt and whispered, "Still remember me, soldier?" He licked her face. Then, slowly, he turned back toward Lucas and walked over, pressing his body beside the boy's again. Valerie smiled, eyes filled with tears. "He's yours now," she said. "I think I was just part of the journey." Later that night, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Will and Lucas sat on the porch. Blitz lay beside them, eyes half closed, tail flicking every so often. "Do you think he misses his old life?" Lucas asked. Will looked at the dog. "Maybe, but I think he was waiting for a reason to love again." Lucas nodded. "Me too." The boy looked down at Blitz. "I used to think I was alone," he said softly, "but I don't anymore." Will swallowed hard. "Neither does he." The wind shifted. The night cooled. And somewhere deep in the silence, a fire long burned out sparked again. Not in the trees, not in the earth, but in the heart of a boy and the dog who chose to guard him. Not for duty, but for love. Autumn fell hard over Northern California. The hills turned gold, then copper, then a brittle shade of gray. Where pine once grew thick, only blackened skeletons remained. The fire had moved on, but the scars stayed behind. For Blitz, healing was slow, though the bandages had come off weeks ago, and the burns along his legs had faded to pink skin under growing fur. He still limped when it rained. His left ear remained half-folded. His gait was different now, less sharp, more deliberate. But it didn't matter to Lucas. To him, Blitz was perfect. To the outside world, he was a miracle. To Lucas, he was family. Blitz had claimed the space beside the boy's bed as his permanent post. He rarely wandered far. The local fire department had even gifted him a new padded dog bed embroidered with the words North Valley Hero. Blitz ignored it most nights, preferring the old woven rug next to Lucas's nightstand, where he could keep an eye on the boy, always. But something shifted in October. It started with the mail. Will stopped by one afternoon, holding a padded envelope with government stamps. Lucas was at the kitchen table doing homework, Blitz napping at his feet. "You got something," Will said. Lucas looked up. "Me?" Will handed him the package. "It's addressed to you, from the state K-9 board." Lucas's mother stood behind him, curious. "Open it, sweetie." Inside was a certificate framed in wood. The gold lettering read, "In recognition of extraordinary bravery and life-saving instinct under extreme circumstances, we hereby honor Blitz, K-9 German Shepherd, as Guardian Emeritus." Lucas stared. "What does that mean?" Will smiled. "It means they're giving Blitz a permanent title. He's not just a retired working dog anymore. He's a symbol. Officially." Lucas looked down at the dog. "You hear that? You're a hero." Blitz lifted his head and thumped his tail once on the floor. The recognition brought more than just mail. In early November, we received a call from an old friend, Chief Brody Walters, head of a newly formed wildfire response unit operating between Oregon and California. "I've got a proposal," Brody said. "Something unique. You know that school we're starting? For teaching rescue readiness to teens." Will nodded. "The one at the edge of the new burn zones?" "Yeah. We want Blitz and Lucas to come talk." No pressure, just their story. You wouldn't believe how many kids are scared after fires. They won't even go near the woods anymore. Will didn't answer immediately. He glanced toward the backyard, where Lucas was throwing a tennis ball and Blitz was trotting after it, ears perked, legs slightly awkward, but determined. He was still trying, still running. "I'll ask them," Will said. Lucas was nervous. He hadn't spoken in front of strangers before. He didn't think his story was that interesting. But Blitz didn't seem concerned. When they arrived at the school 2 weeks later, the students gathered in a wide circle under a scorched redwood canopy. The air smelled of pine and earth, and smoke still lingered faintly from flare-ups in nearby zones. Chief Brody introduced them simply. "This," he said, "is the kid who didn't give up and the dog who didn't let him die." Lucas stepped forward, hands trembling. "My name's Lucas," he said, "and this is Blitz. He's not just a dog. He's my reason." Some kids chuckled quietly. Others leaned forward. "I was trapped during the fire," Lucas continued. "I hid in a shelter. Blitz found me, and he didn't leave. Not even when it got really hot. Not even when everything else burned." He paused. He was already hurt when he found me, but he stayed. Lucas looked at Blitz, who stood beside him, tail swaying gently. "He saved me, and then he stayed after." Silence settled over the group. Then a voice, quiet, uncertain, from one of the students. "My uncle left his dog behind in the fire." Lucas looked at him. "Then I hope he finds his way back, like Blitz did." After the talk, students gathered to pet Blitz. The German shepherd didn't move quickly, but he allowed every touch, every scratch behind the ear, every whispered, "Thank you." One girl knelt and hugged him for a full minute. "My brother didn't come home," she said softly, "but your dog reminds me someone would have tried." Lucas blinked hard but said nothing. When they drove back that night, Lucas stared out the window, quiet. "You okay?" Will asked from the front seat. Lucas nodded slowly. "Blitz didn't just save me," he said. "He saved a lot of people without knowing it." Will gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I think he knows," he said. "Dogs like him, they just feel it." That night, a storm hit. Winds blew in from the coast. Thunder cracked over the valley. The windows of the rental rattled with each gust, and lightning lit the house in sudden, jarring flashes. Blitz didn't sleep. He paced, not anxiously but attentively, watching, listening, guarding. At one point, Lucas sat up and whispered, "It's okay. You can rest." Blitz walked to the boy's side and laid his head on the mattress. Lucas placed his hand on the dog's head and smiled. "I've got you too." The following week, something unexpected happened. The Daniels family received a visit from a man in a gray overcoat. He wore sunglasses even indoors and carried an embossed folder under his arm. "I represent the North California Wildlife Survivors Foundation," he said. Will, sitting in the living room with Lucas and Blitz, narrowed his eyes. "What's this about?" The man smiled thinly. "An opportunity. We've been following the story. The footage. The dog. The boy. We'd like to fund the documentary. Full budget. Professional crew. National release." Lucas's mother raised a brow. "To help other survivors?" "To inspire, of course," the man replied. "But we also see an incredible brand opportunity here. A book deal. Merchandising. Possibly a feature-length film." Will stood slowly. "No." The man blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Lucas looked stunned. "Why?" Will turned to him gently. "Because your story isn't for sale, kiddo. It's for you. It's for everyone Blitz already helped, not for someone else's paycheck." Lucas smiled softly. The man left empty-handed. And Blitz, still lounging near the fireplace, wagged his tail once. Like he approved. The snow came early that year. By December, the valley was white and silent again, but in a different way than after the fire. This silence was peaceful. Lucas and Blitz spent hours outside. They walked slowly through the trails near the river, where snow dusted the blackened tree stumps like frosting, where silence didn't mean loss anymore. It meant presence. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hilltops, casting the world in pink light, Lucas stopped and knelt beside his dog. Blitz sat quietly, nose twitching at the wind. "I don't know why you came to me," Lucas whispered, "but I'm glad you did." Blitz leaned in, touching his nose gently to the boy's chest. Lucas wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, his voice cracking now. "You're my fireproof heart." Blitz didn't bark. He didn't move. He just stayed still and listened like he always did, like he always would. Winter deepened its grip on the valley. The days were short, the nights long, and the cold had teeth. But inside the Daniels rental home, warmth grew in places that couldn't be touched by frost. In the soft thumb of Blitz's tail, when Lucas walked into the room, in the quiet laughter during movie nights, in the way Will always found an excuse to stop by just to check on the dog, though everyone knew it was more than that. Blitz had become the soul of the household. The once wounded K9, with half-folded ears and weathered paws, was now at the center of something more powerful than any rescue operation. He was healing a family. But even the strongest hearts sometimes break in silence. It started with a twitch, a small jerk of Blitz's leg, as he slept by the fire one evening. Lucas, reading a book nearby, noticed it. The dog's paw kicked once. Then again. Then his entire body stiffened. Lucas dropped the book and rushed to his side. "Blitz? Blitz!" The German shepherd's eyes shot open, wild and unfocused. He scrambled his feet, stumbling backward, growling low, not at Lucas, but at the air. Hey, it's okay." Lucas cried, dropping to his knees. Blitz backed into the corner of the room, tail tucked, ears flat, chest heaving. Will came running in from the kitchen, saw the scene, and froze. Lucas get back slowly. But he's scared. Will crouched, voice gentle. "I know, but when a dog like him panics, he doesn't know who's who. We need to give him space." Lucas hesitated, then backed away, tears filling his eyes. Blitz stood trembling in the corner for several long minutes. Then slowly, cautiously, he lowered himself to the ground. His breathing eased, his tail uncurled. Will approached and knelt down beside him. "You with U.S., buddy?" Blitz leaned forward and licked Will's hand. Dr. Aria Monroe came the next morning. After examining Blitz thoroughly, she sat the family down in the living room, her face serious. "It's PTSD," she said softly. "Delayed onset. Not uncommon in retired service dogs, especially those who recently returned to stressful environments." Lucas looked down. "The fire." Dr. Monroe nodded. "It likely triggered something deep. He's been holding it together for your sake, but the brain doesn't forget." "Will he get worse?" Lucas asked. "That depends," she said. "Dogs like Blitz, they need grounding, routine, purpose. He's not just healing, he's still working in his mind." "Working how?" "Protecting you," she said, looking at Lucas. "Every breath you take, every noise outside, he logs it, assesses it. He's always on alert. That's what he was trained to do. But now he doesn't have a command structure. And when his memories surface, it can overwhelm him." Silence settled over the room. Then Will spoke. "What if we give him structure again?" Dr. Monroe raised an eyebrow. "You mean retrain him?" "Not as a cop," Will said. "As a guardian. As a partner. For Lucas." Lucas's eyes lit up. "You mean like therapy work?" "More than that," Will said. "Let him use the instincts he has. But on your terms." Dr. Monroe nodded slowly. "It could work, but it has to be real work. And Lucas would have to train with him." "I'll do it," Lucas said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." Blitz, who had been lying nearby during the conversation, stood and walked over. He sat beside Lucas and rested his head on the boy's shoulder. That was all the answer they needed. The training began the next week. We'll create a schedule, twice a day, short exercises and scent work, command structure, hand signals. Lucas learned quickly. More importantly, he learned how not to command, but to connect. Will showed him how to mirror Blitz's behavior, how to recognize when the dog was alert, relaxed, agitated. "Don't try to dominate him," Will explained. "Try to understand him." Blitz responded immediately. His tail wagged more often. He stopped pacing at night. The nightmares still came, but they lessened. And when they did hit, Lucas knew what to do. Kneel, speak softly, touch his chest gently. "You're home," he'd whisper. "You're not alone." In early February, something unexpected arrived in the mail, a handwritten letter on heavy parchment, sealed in an envelope bearing the insignia of the National Service K-9 Trust. We'll read it aloud in the kitchen. To Blitz, K-9 Guardian Emeritus. Your actions during the wildfire of Redwood Hollow have reached us not through press, but through whispers, through families you've touched, through children who now sleep soundly because they believe in heroes again. We would like to invite you and your human to attend the Service K-9 Legacy Ceremony in Washington, D.C. There, we will honor not only those who served, but those who continue to protect even when the job is over. We hope you'll accept. Captain Morris Albright. Lucas was stunned. You mean Blitz is going to Washington? Will smiled. Looks like he just got drafted again. The trip to D.C. was the first time Lucas had ever flown. He clutched Blitz's leash the entire flight, occasionally glancing out the window as cities passed beneath them like old memories. When they landed, a black SUV was waiting with tinted windows and a driver who said nothing except, "We've been expecting you." Lucas looked at Blitz. "I feel like we're in a spy movie." Blitz gave a short wag. The ceremony took place inside the marble rotunda of the National Canine Service Hall, a building few knew existed, but whose halls were lined with statues of silent, heroic dogs, eyes carved to look forward, never back. The audience was filled with soldiers, handlers, children, and those who had been saved but never had a chance to say thank you. Blitz's name was called last. Will guided him onto the stage. Lucas stood beside him, a hand over the dog's shoulder. Captain Albright, a man in his 70s with eyes that had seen war, stepped forward with a ribbon in his hand. He knelt, bowed his head, and gently tied the ribbon around Blitz's neck. "To those who serve without asking why," he said, voice strong, "we thank you." The crowd rose, and for one long moment, Blitz stood tall, as if every scar, every fire, every memory he had buried rose through his body and out of him in silence. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. He had been heard. That night, back at the hotel, Lucas sat on the floor with Blitz curled beside him. "Did you like it?" he asked. "All those people? That big room?" Blitz blinked slowly. "I know you don't care about ribbons," Lucas said, "but I think maybe this one was for you. Not because you saved me, but because you stayed." He leaned closer. "And I promised to stay for you, too." Blitz gave one soft huff and nuzzled into the boy's side. Outside, the D.C. sky buzzed with city light. Inside, a boy and his dog lay wrapped in a silence warmer than any metal could offer. A silence earned. A silence that said, "We made it." Spring came quietly to the valley. The hills that had once been reduced to ash began to show signs of life. Tiny green shoots pushed their way up through scorched soil. Trees that were thought dead began sprouting small clusters of leaves. And in the hearts of those who had survived, something just as powerful was happening. Healing. For Blitz, the change in season mirrored something internal. He moved easier now. The stiffness in his legs had faded. His fur had grown back and full along his spine, darker and more polished. The ear that had been burned still bent slightly at the tip, but Lucas liked it that way. "Gives you character," he always said, rubbing it gently. Will came by almost every day now. Sometimes he brought training equipment, sometimes new toys. Most times, he just came to sit with Blitz on the porch and drink coffee in silence. They had become two old soldiers, watching the world from a quiet post, both learning that peace wasn't the absence of pain. It was the presence of purpose. And Blitz's purpose had never been clearer. He was Lucas's shadow protector and confidant. The nightmares had almost entirely stopped, and when they did return, Lucas no longer panicked. He would reach out for Blitz, press his forehead against the dog's, and whisper, "We're okay." And they were. But then came the letter. Lucas opened it one afternoon after school. It was from the Redwood Hollow Fire Recovery Council. They were planning a memorial event, the 1-year anniversary of the wildfire that had taken dozens of lives and displaced hundreds more. They were inviting survivors to speak, to honor those lost, to share hope for the future. And they wanted Lucas to close the ceremony. He read the letter 3 times before looking up at Will. "I don't think I can do this." Will nodded slowly. "Because it's hard?" "Because I don't want to remember." Lucas said, voice cracking. What if I cry in front of everyone? Well, lean forward. Then you'll cry, and they'll cry with you, because what happened to you matters. And what Blitz did, that matters even more. Lucas looked down at the dog lying at his feet. You'll be there, right? Blitz lifted his head, tilted it once, and wagged his tail. The ceremony was held in a field that used to be the town square, where trees had once provided shade. Now only their blackened trunks stood like watchtowers. But volunteers had set up tents, planted flowers, and hung photos of lost homes and loved ones between the trees. Hundreds of people showed up. Some wore matching shirts with names on them. Others brought candles. Everyone brought silence. Lucas stood off to the side of the stage, watching a woman speak about her grandfather who refused to leave his home and perished with his 2 dogs. Another man spoke about his wife, a forest ranger who'd radioed in evacuation orders until her signal went silent. Each story carried weight. When Lucas's name was called, the crowd turned. Blitz walked out first. He didn't trot or limp. He marched. The old K9 gait, the steady rhythm of a working dog on mission. His vest was polished, his ribbon gleaming, and at his side, Lucas walked taller than he ever had. The crowd applauded softly as they reached the podium. Lucas cleared his throat. I didn't think I could do this, he began. But then I remembered something my dog taught me, that sometimes bravery isn't running into fire. Sometimes it's staying still when the fire comes to you. He paused. I was alone in a shelter during the fire. I thought I was going to die. But Blitz found me. I don't know how. I still don't. But he stayed. While everything burned around us, he stood over me for hours. Lucas's voice trembled, but he didn't stop. He didn't know who I was. He had no reason to protect me. But he did. And after the fire, when I had nightmares, when I was scared to speak, scared to sleep, he stayed. He looked down at Blitz. I think he stayed because someone once stayed for him. And now we stay for each other. The crowd was quiet. Some were crying. Others had their hands over their hearts. Lucas finished simply. Thank you for listening. And if you ever see a dog like Blitz, don't just say he's brave. Say thank you. He stepped back, and Blitz barked once, sharp, clear, proud. The whole field erupted in applause. Later that evening, Lucas and Will sat by a campfire near the edge of the forest. The stars were out, bright and clean. The wind was calm. Blitz lay on the ground between them, his head on his paws, ears twitching as if listening for distant echoes. You were right, Lucas said. Telling the story did help. Will smiled. You didn't just tell it. You gave it meaning. Lucas turned toward the forest. Some of the trees still bore scorch marks, but others had started growing again, green shoots pushing through the cracks. Do you think Blitz remembers everything? He asked softly. I think he remembers what matters, Will replied. And I think the pain shaped him, but it didn't define him. Lucas nodded. Me too. There was a pause. Then Lucas asked, what happens when Blitz gets old? Will looked at him carefully. He's already old. I know, Lucas whispered. I just don't want to lose him. Will took a deep breath. You won't, he said, because even when he's gone, everything he gave you stays. Courage, trust, love, that never dies. Lucas looked at Blitz, tears in his eyes. I'll make sure I remember, he said. Blitz looked up, leaned against the boy's side, and closed his eyes. In the months that followed, the world moved on. The media stopped calling. The cameras went away. The hashtags disappeared. But in a small rebuilt house at the edge of a forest once turned to ash, a boy and his dog still walked the trails every day. They still stopped by the fire station. They still trained. And sometimes, when the wind was just right, and the trees swayed gently in the quiet, you could hear them. A boy's voice, soft and steady. And beside him, the sound of paws on soil strong, unwavering, alive. Because Blitz never stopped walking. And neither did the heart he saved. If this story inspired you, remember, courage doesn't always bark. Sometimes it just stays. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes in second chances and the dogs who never stop believing in us.